And we are live. Welcome back with Murphy Mack to another episode of the Fitness Beginner Podcast. We got a special episode for y'all today. We are getting the privilege to interview Mr. Cameron Haines, and he is the founder of Mobile Body Scans. But I'm going to let him introduce himself to tell y'all a little bit more about him and what he does.
Hey guys, firstly, Murphy, thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Yes, I'm Cameron Haines, as Murphy's introduced, and I have founded a business called Mobile Body Scans where we use BIA or body scan device in a per scan hire perspective and lease them or short term hire them to customers here in Australia. So we're trying to increase the member perspective in that standpoint. Where my history comes from, I was a personal trainer for 12 plus years, or a fitness trainer, maybe in the States, I think that's what they're called, or a physical
Yep.
trainer.
Fitness trainer.
So I went through the commercial process all the way up into owning my own studio, where I started buying these devices and saw how much they could impact my clients and the way they look at their results and that sort of stuff, and decided to be able to take that out into the market in some ways after doing some hires with some local friends.
Nice. So you said you will lease the body scan machines to the.
But it's like a short-term hire. So like our general process is 3 to 7 days. And the idea is that, and one of the things that I noticed having a machine full time was that I didn't use the machine and utilize it every single day of the week. So there was a lot of periods where there was sort of lulls and that sort of stuff that went through. So the models come about from my experience in the business and doing PT and having the machines in my own studio, where if I had the ability to get it in once a month, 3 to 7 days, or every quarter, whatever I decided to do, or just for challenges, it would then be that I wouldn't have to invest the 30 grand or actually loan money to buy the machine at $30,000 Australian, 25K US, to just sit in the corner for when I wanted to use it. I would be able to monetize it a lot better. I would be able to give the same services at buying one, but I wouldn't have to have all the other upkeep aspects as well.
That's actually interesting. I've never seen anything like that in our area. Either you own the machine, either the gym already has a machine, or we actually have like the nutrition stores. They will actually have one too. I've never actually seen a service for hire like you're offering. So that's pretty unique. I like that. That's a good idea for sure.
And that's where it's sort of come about, because I guess businesses that have the need and the want for a machine, 100% they can go through and do it. And nutrition stores are one of the people that we have hired to in that standpoint, and they may only want it for a promotion, or they may want to trial the machine. I think that's the other side of it that we've seen a lot of recently, is people trialing it and going like, I think I want this machine. I think I want to have this as part of my business model, but there's no way to actually test it and see how it goes. The other side of it is I've looked at it and tried to keep the cost as low as possible. So realistically, there is a margin of at least what we charge the hiring business, they could put on top of our costs. So they're profitable from the first perspective in comparison to having to loan, say, six, $700, $1,000 a month in some cases to have the machine. They could literally hire it off us, and they could be profitable from that straight away in terms of each scan that they do and the service they provide.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said so not just the machine, but you also offer the analysis part of it too as well. How does that
Yeah,
work?
yeah. So every scan, there's an analysis done. So we provide the back end software on that stuff. And depending if the customer wants it or the hiring business wants it, we can also provide a printer. We've kind of gone away from the printer, mainly because it's just an A4 piece of paper. There is now an in-body app that is worldwide, as far as I understand, that all of the data gets pushed up into the cloud, which means that the client stays in ownership of their data as well, which I think is really important. That allows them to be more in control of it and also have that digital perspective to be able to share it to whoever they wanted to.
With today's day and age, you don't need paper anymore. Everything's by email nowadays. So
And I just saw so many clients, they would literally take their piece of paper, they would pop it in their car, and you would see it in their car or that sort of stuff 6 months later. What are they going to do with a piece of paper? No one goes home and files it these days. This
yeah,
device just holds everything for us.
exactly. So when it comes to these machines, I know they can detect all kinds of different metrics and things. So what are some of the main metrics that y'all measure for? And what would you say, what is the one most important one that you look for?
Ooh, the one most important is the hard one, I would say.
I know that's kind of gonna it's gonna depend on the client, obviously, but
It does. The main metrics I would look at is sort of the top there's a little section at the top, which is the top three, which is your muscle mass, your fat mass, and then your overall weight. For me, this is where the machines really kick into their gear, because one of the sayings that I use and I use in this business is that in terms of weight, that's just your relativity to gravity. The two numbers that matter alongside your relativity to gravity are how much muscle mass you have and how much fat mass you have. If you have a high muscle mass and a low fat mass, you're obviously going to be in a healthier standpoint in most cases than the opposite way around. So that would be the top three. In my experience, I don't like to harp on it because people think I do, but muscle mass is king. So if I could only find out one single figure out of what I get out of any of these machines, it would be muscle mass. Retrospectively, a lot of people would choose fat mass because that seems to be the way that a lot of people look at it.
Yeah, I agree with you on the muscle mass side of things. I think the more muscle, the better, in my opinion.
It's functional. Muscle is what really makes us move in some ways. Yes, fat mass is important, but just because you reduce fat mass doesn't mean that you're healthier. Just because you reduce your weight doesn't mean you're healthier. I've got a scan of someone that went through gastric sleeving surgery prior and post the gastric sleeving surgery. They were originally with myself, chose to in my business. We parted ways. They went and did sleeving 6, 12 months later, and then they came through in a scan higher perspective. And they lost, I think it was 80 kilos. It was huge. So what's that? What's 80 kilos in pounds? 150 pounds, 140
Yeah,
pounds, something
that's a
crazy
lot.
like that. But in that process, they lost, I think it was 25 kilos of muscle mass, somewhere in there. Like it was huge. Like a massive percentage of what they actually lost was muscle mass. And again, this person's probably stayed their life still, but they are not going to be as functional long term because they will never be able to build the muscle mass that they might have been able to if they had a full stomach in some ways.
That's true. So you said you measure those are good metrics to measure, but is there any metric that you see that is like a red flag? If you see this like sticks out to you like a sore thumb, this person needs to get healthy right now, or they're going to end up
Um,
in a bad
it's
spot.
a It's a balance. I would say like an extraordinarily high fat percentage. That's one thing that would straight away mark it. And it doesn't actually mean that they need to get healthy. It might just mean they need to make massive changes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there was a recent hire where I was called into the business to help support the hiring business because there was a customer who was a really regular exerciser, but they just still had a really high fat mass. And I had to try and help interpret the information in a way because they were healthy, they were fit, but because of their choices and the way they were training, they were just never prioritizing a muscle mass. So they were always diminishing muscle mass and their fat mass wasn't really changing much. So I'd say, and that was someone, we're talking they were only 70 kilos, 80 kilos, so 160, 170 pounds or less than that. And they were, I think, like 35% fat mass, which was huge. That's big in terms of that way for a female as well. So that would be the one that probably is the easiest one to look at. The other one that I always like to look at is water masses. So the intercellular and extracellular water is something these machines that I use pick up. And if you see a really low water mass, yes, it affects the body fat percentage, but realistically, our body runs on water. So we can straight away start to see and help people interact better in that way with their health.
And your advice to them would just be drink more water if you see that there's a low water percentage there.
It comes down to a conversation. There is, yes, drinking more water. I'm a true believer in water source. So whether your water source has minerals and that sort of stuff in it is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then looking into your salt intake and that sort of stuff. Because again, there's people that show they've got a really good water mass, but they're just massive salt intakers. So their body just doesn't get rid of water. So there's different ways of looking at it, but realistically, most of the time it's about, are you consuming enough water? My perspective is 3% of your body weight in kilos, that is. I think it's 1.5% if you're doing it in pounds. Gives you a rough perspective in liters, how much you should be drinking is an easy way to do it.
Here in the States, we always just say a gallon. A gallon of water a day is that's a good target
Look,
to go
and
for.
again, that's 4 liters or something in Australian
Yeah,
terms. So like,
I think
that's huge amounts.
yeah,
And
it's a
again,
lot of.
if someone was getting up to that sort of range, there is no way that they should be dehydrated in any standpoint at all. But it's pretty cool to see that in a standpoint because again, we over here, I would say most people struggle to drink 2 liters of water in Australia. If we had the gallon metric, I think it'd be much simpler. Even if you're striving for a gallon and you only get halfway, you're better off.
It's funny that you mentioned the water and the salt intake. So I actually just did an Ironman. I just completed one in November, and
Nice.
that was a huge part of my training, making sure I got enough water and enough salt in. So
Yeah.
I extra consumed electrolytes, salt, and water during my whole training period. So I
Yeah.
learned a lot
Well,
more about it during that training process.
huge amounts. And again, at the end of the day, it's one of the things our body consumes probably more than we realize in a lot of ways. And again, the whole adage, and again, I've seen this with body scan devices, even people doing Ironmans. Yes, you may lose a little bit of muscle mass, but it's actually more your water that sits in your cell mass. So if we were to do a scan day before, day after your Ironman, you would probably see a muscle mass difference. But then 2 days later, once everything sort of evened out again, you'd be back up to the same perspective. So this is where, again, the information can be a bit misleading depending on the
Mm.
way that you interpret it, just because of how it uses it. At the end of the day, the machines that I use, or BIA devices, which is a frequency device, they have to use water as the conductive method. So you will never see, I believe, that scans with low water masses are not as accurate as scans with high water masses.
I lost about 20 pounds during my training, and then since then I've put on about 10 pounds already, and it's only been about 2 months or so. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think a lot of that's just water weight fluctuating.
And again, there is also your body becomes, there is an equilibrium from my knowledge in training. If you were doing to train for an Ironman, it's not like you're just running 1 mile a day and swimming 2 laps of the pool. There's a lot of hours in there as well. So the body has
Mhm.
to regulate itself. And this is part of where I can see that body scan machines have an ability to help people is make decisions on that, is seeing and even recording what was your body metrics at your peak of Ironman fitness. What was it 3 months later? And you can make adjustments and go, well, I don't want to go back to full Ironman training, but I'd love to try and keep that a little bit more even in some ways. So maybe I can do half the load of training and still keep my ideal metrics.
Everybody in the triathlon world, they always just harp on getting your electrolytes, your salt in, your water, and things like that. So that was a huge part of a huge learning curve that I had to learn getting into because I never did any kind of endurance training before. I always just did working out, like strength training and things like that. So it was actually pretty neat having to learn the whole other side of fitness.
It's
So
one
I
of probably
enjoyed
the
it a lot.
main it's probably the main reason that people don't compete, like don't finish those events, isn't it? That they don't
Yeah,
manage their electrolytes and stuff.
they don't eat enough fuel or they get dehydrated, so their body just can't keep going.
Yeah.
That's a huge. So like they always say, because you have swim, you have bike, and you have run, but they always say your nutrition is the fourth aspect of Ironman because it's absolutely critical. You have to have nutrition on point, or you won't be able to finish. You won't be able to do the marathon at the end. Your body will just give up. And luckily, I did pretty well. I never cramped up until right at the very end, right before the finish line. My leg, it tried to cramp up on me a little bit, but I stretched it out real quick, and it was good after that. So I finished, and I did pretty well.
No,
So I was happy with
that's
myself.
amazing. That's something not a lot of people can say they've done.
It was a bucket list item for me for sure.
I get that. I can understand that.
So you mentioned the machines you use is a BIA machine. What exactly is that?
Bioimpedance analysis is, or analyzer is the wording, and those machines are frequency-based machines. So they, through electrodes, they send different levels of frequency through the body, which resonates, and the impedance level, so how long that, I don't like to say electricity, but that frequency or electricity that goes through the body that comes back to those sensors is then what they can determine all your metrics from in some ways. So different machines, and through some research and other podcast people that I've talked to in the States, it seems like the States have a little bit of the lower level machines, which is in our world, or in the world one I use, InBody 270, where we use the 570s or the 770s. That's just different frequencies, and they offer different metric levels.
That's actually one of the questions I was going to ask you. Different types of machines. So the ones the nutrition stores have are you stand on them and you hold two little handles in your hand.
Yep.
I don't know much about these machines. So I don't know what kind that is. So
Yeah,
that's one.
that's
And, and then they also
that's the ones I'm
have,
talking about.
and then at one of the gyms here, they have one that it's like a 3D body scan. So you stand on
Mhm.
machine and you do a 360 and it scans your body. So that's I don't know, that's a
Correct.
little different. And then
Yeah,
then you also have what they call a DEXA scan, and they say that
correct.
one's the most accurate. That's what I've heard at least.
It's a really funny conversation, I guess. the ones that I'm talking about and we use are the mobile ones, or ones that we can have mobile as part of the business, which is the ones you see in the supplement stores. You can pack them up and you can put them in your car and theoretically drive them. Depending on who you talk to, and there is different ones on the market. I'm talking specifically in-body based ones. They are about as accurate as they get in some ways.
And that's the
Now,
brand name. InBody is the
yes,
brand. Okay.
in-body is the brand name. They are about as accurate as they get. And at the end of the day, I guess all of them use some sort of equation, but to me, in my research, I believe the frequency based ones are close to the best that can be there, as long as they don't ask you prerequisite questions, because prerequisite questions can be used to interpret the information differently, is my belief.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at the ones that are 3D scanning you, again, they're amazing and they create that model. And I guess this is where they back onto what you mentioned in DEXA. Now, DEXA, I get DEXA is probably it's the gold standard across the board for a long period of time. But interestingly, in my own experience and from a business perspective, I question it in a lot of ways, because at the end of the day, an X-ray sees those tissues as different colors. Then we use equations to go, well, we think that muscle tissue equates to this. Now, if we're talking bone density and stuff, DEXA by far outweighs anything else. But this is where, again, there is always positives and negatives to these systems. And when it comes to availability, ease of use, regularity of use, you probably shouldn't be getting a DEXA scan or won't get a DEXA scan on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. It might be annual, where a BIA machine, you could jump on weekly, monthly, it doesn't really matter, because just the way the machine works. As long as it's got electrodes at your feet and your hands, you will definitely get a better result out of it. Which again is an interesting thing I found out, that the home scales a lot of us step onto or have stepped onto, they will only test the bottom end of your body. So the fat percentage that it's actually reading you is only probably to your belly button at best, which is where most of us hold our fat, is above our belly buttons.
It's interesting. I didn't realize that the home skills would do that. I just have a
Yeah.
generic basic one that just does your weight.
Well, if you think about it, your two electrodes, so there's even ones you can have as the handhelds. Because the frequency has to go between the two electrodes, that's all that it can test. So it tests the quickest path between those two electrodes. So I have seen people, and I know of someone who hired our machine back in the early days. They would do both. They kind of got around it in some ways. They would do a handheld device and then get someone to stand on a standing device, and they would leverage it. But again, it's an average. It's probably not as accurate as it could be, but it's one way to get around spending 30 grand. And that's partly where this business came about, because we offered it on that cheap rate and they were then able to offer that inside their business.
So, on a scale from 0% to 100%, how accurate would you say one of these machines are?
Wording is in the 99s, 98s in that standpoint. Again, the more I've done some of these conversations, the more I've personally contemplated it and thought about it. And realistically, it's all an equation. It's all a thought process. I don't think we can ever be 100% specific. The newest of them in-body machines is getting pretty crazy. I tested it in Queensland here a couple of years ago, and it's supposedly within a couple of percent of a CT scan. That to me is where I look at, and I've learned is the truest gold standard. But we're not. No one is going to have access to a full body CT scan, and you're not going to go through that process for many reasons just to get your body fat and your muscle mass percentages in some ways.
So, would you say these machines are more accurate than the old school skin caliber test for like body fat percentage? For
Yeah,
sure.
massively. Because I would say purely just on one reason, a lot of our fat mass is not in our skin. So we've got visceral fats, we've got brown fats, we've got white fats, all these different things. Most of that is not in the top layer of our skin. Just if you're dehydrated, you can get a much skinnier skin fold, and that's because your cells aren't as engorged. So it's a good method from the 1950s or whatever else. But realistically, in this day and age, and for the ease of use, 100% these machines are much better.
I figured the same, but I still see some people using an old skin caliber machine. I feel like that's a little outdated nowadays.
I think it comes down to some standpoints of that it's the history, right? And it's a way that people can compare to maybe their idols in a lot of ways. And also it's availability. A skin fold caliper off Amazon is what, $10? It's cheap.
That's
But the pace I would say, like I did a skin fold course way back in my perspective, and it was seriously hard to know exactly that you've got the skin and not the subcutaneous. There's all these different things. And it's like it's a tough thing to do. And if you don't have the caliper on the right angle, there's just so much margin for error is one other thing I would say. If that's what people are using as their metric, it's great to get a ballpark, but I would never use it as a true guidance in that standpoint.
So I know we mentioned gyms a little bit and we mentioned nutrition stores. So what kind of gyms would you recommend you use one of these body scan machines? Any kind of gym? 'Cause you have like CrossFit gyms, strength training gyms, beginner level gyms, nutrition stores. What are some other kind of gyms that you would recommend that could see benefits from using these machines?
I would broaden that to say any business that cares about their customers' results and being able to display to their customer what is actually going on in their body. So we go out into allied health, we go to nutritionists, life coaches was a recent one that I've recently done as well. There's all these different standpoints. There is no one out there and no business out there that wouldn't benefit from the perspective to be able to go even across a challenge, which is, I guess, the easiest way to explain it. If you've got the scans of 50 people prior to them completing 8 weeks inside your business, in whatever standpoint that might be, and then at the end of it, you can categorically say, well, on average, our customers lost X amount of fat mass, X amount of gained X amount of muscle mass, lost X amount of fat mass, improved their metrics by blah, blah. Is going to be powerful in marketing. It's going to be powerful across the board in terms of anything that you can do. So for me, it's broad. Anyone that has that perspective of caring and wanting to show their customers could benefit from these machines.
So say a gym already owns one of these machines. Could they still hire you to come in and do all the analysis and the background, all the software that goes along with it, and you could analyze it for them and as like an extra service?
It's becoming an extra service, and I try and step out of it. And my main reason for that is my interpretation and is my perspective. So one of the biggest points I saw from when I didn't have a machine in my own studio, when I was sending people out to get scans, was my customers would come back with an interpretation of someone else that had a different viewpoint. And I had the experience of this when I was doing interpretations for another client. They just finished a fight camp, probably similar to you in terms of doing your triathlon. I didn't know what they just trained for though. So I looked at their before and after. Well, fortunately, you've lost some muscle mass. And straight away, I'm on the negative side, right? When I didn't realize this person had done a fight camp. They didn't care about muscle mass for the past 9 weeks, 12 weeks. They literally were just all about cardio. They were doing 5 rounds, 6 rounds, all the rest of it. So that's one of the biggest things that part of the reason I don't try and do the interpretations. I am more than happy to consult and educate and help my customers. And there is a perspective in the business pipeline. I am looking at doing a bit of a license or an education thing on my experience and how to get these machines to be more useful inside of businesses. And part of that is upskilling staff. But it's a new perspective I'm looking at that I've learned in the past sort of 6 to 12 months, because there is a definite hole in the market there where these machines are just probably underutilized. People are told to jump on them, they get their results, and they're like, and the business is like, get out of here. And I believe that's purely because the business is trying to recoup the costs on the machine. And at the end of the day, that's what they see that they're selling is like, well, they've got information, so off you go. When realistically, that customer's asking for connection, they're asking for interaction, and they're sometimes even asking for guidance and being like, well, I've been killing myself, and for yourself in a triathlon perspective, I just did a triathlon, but I haven't lost that much weight, or I've lost so much weight, I don't know what I need to do now to maintain this. And that's where a professional should be stepping in or coming in and helping out that customer.
Definitely think having somebody there to help train not only the employees on using the machine, but also helping the clients understand what the data is actually saying. Because I've done a few of these machines myself, and there's about 1,000 different numbers on there. And for being honest, I don't know what half of them even mean. So I think having
And
a
like
course on that would help a lot with.
And like anybody offer that, and hopefully people get given these sort of things. So there's like an interpretation guide that should come with stuff. And they are helpful. It just summarizes. And again, I think this is just where the business side of it comes in. And even I ran it very differently when I had my studio. My idea was that I wasn't giving my clients the information straight up. The idea was that the machines were just always accessible. We gave them to our customers for free when I had the studio. And the idea was that it goes onto the back end system. Me and my team members could log on and categorically look through and go, well, this is what's going on, because we knew what their training was doing. And that's again part of the process where I realized that that's part of the importance of a body scan, is that I know their training. So it's different if a random person off the street just came in and wanted to get a scan. I'm just more inquisitively asking questions and I just guide them through the information. But when there's a person that's doing a course or doing a program through someone, realistically, they are on a curve of what they should be getting out of that program. And that's where, again, I can see how the interpretation is where the truest value is. And that's where, again, these costings of the machines comes in. A scan isn't that expensive in some ways. It's use of the machine. What people should be looking to and paying for is the interpretation and the level of interpretation that goes along with the use of the machine.
So besides the interpretation side of things, or what else are you trying to do with y'all's business, say in the next 5 to 10 years? You mentioned y'all want to provide a course or education for that side, but are y'all looking to expand? Are you trying to come to the States, or you want to stay locally in Australia, or what's the goals for the
Um,
next few years?
I definitely don't see international growth. Maybe licensing my idea into might get to an international growth sort of perspective in terms of that anyone who has a machine could do my model. There is no reason they couldn't. It's just the application of it. And I do believe there is definitely some proprietary perspective of what I've learned and how to interact with the customers and the business. I would love to sort of, I think the costs will be prohibitive in terms of franchising, but I can definitely see the license side of it, or even education through a course being the way forwards that this will go in some ways, because I just I can't be on the road. We've got 3 machines at the current time, and I can spend 25, 30 hours in the car just shifting those machines around. So that's going to be the prohibitive standpoint of it, is that you need machines locally. There is a brain idea that I don't know how it would work, of like just having a machine in a storage unit, and that people literally have the ability to access the storage unit. But I think there's some risks associated with that that I don't think I'm willing to take.
I think an online course is a good way for you to expand the business, so you can reach those other sides of the world, the different countries, with providing them that service of the course, teaching them how to use the machines properly, how to interpret the data and the analytics and things like that. So I think that'd be a good little
And I will
venture
mention
business.
100%. I will mention that InBody and most businesses that people purchase machines through, they do have to do an InBody, like a certification course. So for people that are listening and going to these things, you can't theoretically just buy a machine and just put it in your garage and have no information. The people that have these machines should and will have had to do some sort of interpretation course. It more just comes down to, and any course I'd be providing wouldn't be as much in, would be in that, but it would also be how to utilize it in the business aspect would
Yeah.
be the biggest things. And helping a business or B2B perspective go, okay, well, how do I make this work? And skipping the steps where I missed, just buying them and learning that process.
So we're up on the 30-minute mark. Are you good with that, or are you
I'm
want to
happy
keep
to keep
going?
going. Doesn't bother me.
Okay. I just want to respect your time.
No, that's all good.
So you pretty much answered all the questions I had about the body machines. Is there anything else regarding the body machines specifically you'd like to tell everyone?
I think we've sort of covered it all. Like the key points of, like, yes, the take home things, home machines being maybe not as accurate or very inaccurate. A lot of different standpoints. I guess the one other thing that's a real big conversation point is BMI. I recently did some more research into this and never realized that it was so archaic, like, which is what a lot of people go off, was actually
Hmm.
initiated in the 1800s. So why we are still using that in 2024, I don't even know. Actually a really bad racial perspective of why BMI was created, which I didn't know. I was originally under the interpretation it was done around the world wars. That's kind of part of the other thing, is that we need to get away from BMI, our relativity to gravity, and start looking at our health in a very different way, because we have the technology to do this stuff now. And I believe we would start to see a much healthier population, which is a personal goal of a fitness provider, because of that, because we'd actually have people looking at who they are and what they're made of, in comparison to just trying to meet these bell curves that are completely useless in some manners.
Yeah, I agree with you on the BMI. The BMI definitely is way off, and I'm like great example of BMI because according to the BMI, I am overweight. Like I'm borderline obese with my
Correct.
height and my weight. But if you was to look at me, you would never think that like I'm not overweight by any means. It's just because I hold a lot more muscle on my frame than a normal 5'9" person would. So yeah,
Yeah.
BMI is not the best
It's
measure.
an interesting one. I, full of all people that may be listening in that way, look it up. Your own eyes will be interesting to read what it actually is. But the reason it was created and why it was created, which was in America, crazy to kind of comment in that standpoint. And it's, again, it's just a way of dividing people and it's a way of categorizing, which I get. But then when we look at the health industry, like GPs and all of that sort of stuff, or our medical world, even know of someone who nearly got refused life-altering nasal surgery because of his BMI, where he himself has about 70 kilos of muscle mass on his body,
Wow.
like a strong guy. And again, like he would have to probably lose half of that muscle mass and relative fat mass to ever get close to BMI. So
Mm-hmm.
when you have the ability to look at this and kind of, okay, 150 kilos or 300 pounds, but I'm 70 kilos of muscle mass or 140, 130, 140 pounds of muscle. Okay, got a different conversation to have now in comparison to ever thinking that this person is unhealthy, overweight, whatever else. They are just a massive machine in terms of muscle. Like you chuck the blockers in NFL called
Alignment.
linemen.
Yeah.
Yeah, chucked one of those guys on a body scan machine, you'd be very surprised to see how much muscle mass those guys have on. And they are bloody fit. They are not people that are should be categorized as obese in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, the strongest dudes by far.
Yeah. Again, if we looked at a metric wise, you'd be able to, and I guess that's one other thing that I do like about these machines is you could go from that to a side running person or even a triathlete. And you could go, well, okay, both are from very different disciplines, but you are both showing us that you have a solid metric in these and a solid metric in that. Be able to have some sort of relativity to know and be able to help each of those person progress in their career or their health.
All right. So let's hop into a few little fun, well, what I like to call fun questions at the end, just
Yeah.
to end things off. So, what got you into fitness in the first place?
My own injuries. I had many joint injuries. So from the age of 12, I blew out my knee when I was 12. Before that, actually, I think in a little push bike accident. But I had 3 knee surgeries, shoulder, hip surgery. So for me, my journey was very much around helping people be able to try and create a limitless environment for people to grow into what they wanted to.
So you didn't have a choice; you had to learn fitness to kind of for recovery standpoint.
Yeah, I kind of pushed into it and had my own. My parents got me a trainer and that sort of stuff. I saw the importance of it, and I guess hand up, I didn't do my recovery as good as I could have in a lot of ways, but I was
Yeah.
so young. Could never tell me at that age, or I don't think you'd ever tell anyone at that age that you're going to be impactful in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s and etc. if you decide to be lazy now. Yeah, definitely had to learn this perspective, and also because of all the appointments I had to go to is where I upskilled. Like I don't have university degrees and that sort of stuff behind me or college degrees. Had a truckload of on-the-job training, where it's my own body or then through the thousands of clients that I've assisted and helped over the years. Learned a lot of information just from those people.
Yeah. So if you had one piece of advice for people that are either wanting to start the fitness journey or just started their fitness journey, what would that advice be?
This one's a funny one. People a lot of the time think it's because of what the business I do. It's understand who you are. Do not go into a journey with this preconceived idea that you want to lose 50 kilos. Do you know your fat mass, your muscle mass, your water ratios, all that sort of stuff? You should not be having a weight-based goal at all. Even in terms of fitness, a preconceived idea that you're going to run a marathon, you have to look at your history, you have to look at your ability. All of those sort of things are massive. So for me, it's engage a professional that has understanding or look into truly understanding what your journey looks like and start small and progress into it. Don't go into it, sure for you. You didn't go into it straight away from your first effort, like you're going to do an Ironman. You had to figure out you could run a marathon prior to doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I ran a few little smaller triathlons before I did my Ironman.
Yeah,
Um, I always like to say before you start a fitness journey, you should do a self assessment. So
yeah,
your weight and all that, like you mentioned, all of that would be part of that self assessment. This will give you a good starting point, a good understanding of like you're at and where you're trying to get. That way you can have point A to point B and you got to get there. Because if you don't know where you're starting at, then you're go up the creek without a paddle, like trying to get somewhere without a roadmap there. And it's not going to do, I mean, yeah, you may figure it out eventually, but it's going to take you a lot longer than it would if you would have figured it out from the get go and had that, like you said, professional advice or just knew exactly what you needed to do to get to your goal.
Yeah, and I love that wording. That is an amazing answer. I can see it's so clear and concise, but also you don't have to have professionals involved. If you were able to gather the information and in that you could see if you gather these 3 points and you self-assess on these 3 points, that might be all you need. I really like your wording there in that standpoint.
Yeah. It's a kind of same question, but instead of fitness related, we'll say if you had one piece of advice to give somebody that wants to start a business, like an entrepreneur, somebody that what you're doing is started your own business and now you're trying to grow and expand, what would be that one piece of business advice?
Mine would be passionate about what you're doing because business is hard. It sucks. There's many ups and downs. And at the end of the day, you need to be passionate to get through the lows. There's been a period of time where I thought I would just fold this business in some ways because I just wasn't able to get the interaction that I needed in some standpoints, but it's grown past that now. If you didn't have the passion behind it of wanting to help people or whatever it might be, I don't think people will survive in that standpoint through business. It's a tough gig.
Yeah, sure, you definitely have to love what you're doing. Um, I actually did a little personal training at one point, and it wasn't it for me. Like I know I want to do fitness. I love fitness. That's why I do the podcast, and I've started to make some fitness content, like in some YouTube channel, some things like that. But I realized that actual personal training is not necessarily my passion. It's more of making the content to help people. So it's kind of still helping people in a way. It's just a different medium of helping people. I'm not actually coaching them. I'm
100%.
just doing the content. So it took some trial and error to kind of that out. So and now we're on the podcast now, and this is what we're doing. So
Exactly. And I can really look at that. And again, where I've gone to with this business is partially that. Like I was just, a young family now. So doing 4 a.m. starts and 9 p.m. finishes, you can't do it. And again, like I did that for 12 years. The passion was there for me to want to get up and do that for so long. But there is only a length of a certain time period you can ever do that. And that's where the passion changes. And I guess you can keep that root cause of like, I still want to try and help people, but I am not going to put my body and my life detriment of that in any more in some ways. So again, great wording from you.
yeah. All I got. Is there any questions that you wanted to ask me specifically?
Inquisitive, like came to the triathlon and that sort of stuff. What was the hardest or the biggest componentry? You mentioned electrolytes, but outside of that, is there any other areas that I guess you really took out of that journey?
I learned a lot actually. So I didn't have any background in swimming, biking, or running. So I learned literally three whole sports basically. So that was huge. One of the biggest components of doing the Ironman was just the amount of time that's required to do it. So hours that I put in to train for it was a lot, like more than I ever expected. Basically trained 7 days a week for months. It was a lot of time and effort, and it would be very hard for like I don't have kids or anything yet, so luckily I had like the time to do it. But it would be hard for somebody that was working a full time job, have kids, things like that. So the time was a huge component of it, and I have a lot of respect for all the people out there that do Ironmans that do have kids and things like that because I know that they're making a lot of sacrifices. I had to make a lot of sacrifices for things that I enjoy, like my hobbies and things. I pretty much cut them all out. I didn't do anything but go to work and train for the Ironman. That's all I did from
It is your
basically
hobby.
from like months. That's all I did. So
Yeah.
it was a huge component.
My brother's started to get into it. I don't think he's done an Ironman yet, but I know for him, even it was like his bikes and runs were commuting to work. I know he's got 2 kids. It's crazy to hear some of the stories that come out of it. Drop the kids off in the city, go park the car on the outskirts of the suburbs, and then run back in. Crazy. Like it just interests me because like know of how much time commitment people put into it, and it's that end goal. Except for like off a bucket list, it's a crazy objective to go into in that standpoint. And the people that do it professionally, man, are they absolute animals.
Yeah, them dudes are freaks. They're on a whole nother level.
Yeah,
they
to
take extreme. They take like a professional sport to a whole nother level because
Yeah.
most professional sports, you only train for one sport, like you one thing, and that's it. But when it comes to triathlon and Ironman, you're literally training for three different sports. You have to get really, really good at all three different sports, and they're all completely different. Like all endurance based sports, but as far as the techniques and the body parts that you're using, they're all completely different. So you have to really hone in on each specific
Discipline.
part of the race. Yeah,
Yeah.
discipline. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Crazy. Congrats on doing it. It's just something
Thank
I
you, thank
definitely
you.
know I won't be doing.
Oh yeah, it was a huge accomplishment. I'm very proud of it. And I'm honestly, I liked it so much. I'm probably gonna do another one. I've already decided I'm gonna do another one, but I don't know when. Like I have another goal of I want to do a bodybuilding show as well. So I think I'm
Nice.
gonna do that first, and then maybe do another Ironman afterwards or something. I don't know. I'm still trying to decide right now because
Get
either
it.
way, it's a big time commitment. So trying to get my priorities right first, and then I'm gonna commit to doing one of the two.
Gonna swing that pendulum. Doing a bodybuilding competition, I would definitely see as the harder route because from this end of the scale to that end of the scale back to that end of the scale.
Yeah, well, the bodybuilding side of things is more of like what I do day to day. Like I came
Yeah.
from like
Okay.
the style of workouts that I do are more bodybuilding based. I came from, so that's kind of the background. So it wouldn't be as much like full transition into Ironman was a huge change for me because it was completely different from what I was doing. Like I wasn't doing any cardio really at all. Yeah, doing the Ironman was a complete 180 from what I was doing. But
Yeah.
I'm back in the gym now doing like basic bodybuilding stuff. So I'm pretty much back to what I was doing before.
It's definite, and I can see the content and the enjoyment perspective just in the way you talk about that as well. So I'll be just an observer from the other side of the world.
I may have to have Ironman over there in Australia. I may have to make it over
Oh
there one
yeah,
day. It'll be cool.
yeah. There's a few. I think we got a couple of 702s and that sort of stuff. I believe that's the terminology. 703s.
The
They're like three.
70.3.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the half Ironman. Yeah.
There's definitely some Ironman stuff over here. I definitely know those 70.3 stuff. I think there's even a circuit over here. I know my brother's done a couple of those up in Noosa and that sort of stuff. Yeah, worldwide thing. I think I believe my brother's goal is to do the Masters at the Hawaiian Ironman, something like that.
Yeah. So in Kona, Hawaii, that's where they have the world
That's one.
championships every year. That's
Yeah,
probably what he's talking about.
yeah,
But
no,
that you have to qualify for that one. So you have to,
correct.
yeah, come in a certain position. It's kind of like the Boston Marathon. You have to qualify for it. So
Yeah, you
that's a
can't
big
just sign
goal.
up.
Yeah, that's a big goal to have is to if you qualify for Kona, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, again, that's so in his world, that's his life. That's what he does. Like he say, he got rid of all of his hobbies, like from his family and his kids. It's Iron Man.
Yeah, yeah, and it's your
Um,
hobby at that point.
you know,
All you have time to do.
the bike bits, the running, the rest of it, it's all there in that standpoint. But again, I get what you're saying. It's a interesting multiple disciplinary aspect, and again, you got to be good at all of it in that way.
Well, all right, man. It was I enjoyed our chat today. I enjoyed learning about the body scans. Honestly, I don't know anything about those little body scans, so I actually learned a lot today just sitting here talking to you about it.
Yeah, I always offer it. If you get one done and you do want to have a chat, feel free to reach out. I'm really interested to sort of differences and also experience what people on the other side of the world are being told or interpretations, because again, that really grows my knowledge and ability to help my own customers.
Yeah, anytime I've ever had one, I never had the person kind of it to me. I've always just gotten my results and I've looked at it myself. I've never had somebody actually go over it with me. So I think that
Yeah,
would be pretty good eye opening to have somebody like each and every point to me.
yeah, definitely a lot of metrics behind it. So if you're interested, let me know. Let's organize a time and we'll have a chat with it.
Of course. So before we let you go, I want to let you plug all your social medias, the business, let everybody know how they can get in contact with you or learn about what else you do.
Yeah, for sure. So mobilebodyscans.com.au is the best place. Social medias and stuff is all mobile body scans. So it's like mobile body scans, New South Wales ACT. We're trying to segregate that a bit, but mobilebodyscans.com.au is where any of our courses or any of that sort of stuff in the future will all be listed on that website.
Awesome. So yeah, y'all check him out. But that's gonna do it for the podcast today. Y'all don't forget, subscribe to the podcast channel on YouTube and leave a like view on your podcasting service, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast at. But until then, we'll see y'all next week in another episode of the Fitness Beginner Podcast. Y'all have a great day.